This conference will now be recorded.
Hi Krashik, because last session I was not able to attend and even though not able to watch that video. So just quick overview on that last, just like 1 to 2 minutes about that last session. Is it fine?
Sure, Shahancha. Yeah. I mean, normally that's the process we follow. Uh, we generally cover, go through the topics which we covered here in the previous session for initial few minutes, and then we'll start with the new concepts every day. Okay, I mean, before we start today's session, let me go through the previous session concepts once. Like it was a complete demo session where we discussed about a few important things what is performance testing and what are the different tools available in the market and because this was this load runner course, so we discussed about load runner architecture, and as part of that architecture we discussed about the various components okay, of load runner, and what each component does, what is the responsibility of each component, and and then we did a practical example of sample record and replay of the script of the okay, using Vugen, which is one of the component of load runner architecture. Then we discussed about the course content, okay, and then we had some final Q&A session. So these were the main agenda points yesterday. So what is performance testing? So at a very high level, okay, after discussing with couple of examples, we we have discussed something like this, right? So checking the performance of an application by applying some load. Okay, load means the number of users. Like I have given the example of a lift. Okay, just a normal example, generic example. Like if you go inside the lift and let's say you are on the ground floor and you press 3, that means you have to go to third floor. So how much time it is taking to go to third floor is important for us as a performance tester, right? But at the same time, going alone or and going with full capacity of the lift are different, right? That means if the lift capacity is 10 people, and if 10 people are on board and then you are pressing 3, that means you have to go to third floor with all 10 people in, then how much time it is taking to go to third floor? Okay, because without applying load, okay, you cannot say whether application is performing well or not. Like if you are testing with a single user, that doesn't make sense, right? If you're testing with a single user, I mean it can be also be covered as part of functional testing also, that is manual testing also, it can be covered. So performance testing itself means you have to check the application performance by applying some load. Okay, similar to the lift example, we have taken some bank application, right? So when I was explaining about the load runner architecture, I took an example of a bank. Okay, let's say where if I give you a bank application to test with 500 users, so how would you generate those 500 users? So will you bring 500 users and assign them laptops and ask them to test? That's not the right approach. So you have to simulate those virtual users. So this load generator was the component which will generate the users for us. Okay, so how many users each load generator machine can generate? It depends on the configuration of that load generator machine. Okay, for which we will have a detailed session in our upcoming day. Then one more component was Vugen, which is purely uh, used for script development. or script generation or recording the script. And then you have controller or performance center. Basically, this is used for triggering the execution. Okay, whatever the scripts that you developed in Vusion, okay, so whatever the scripts that you developed here should be uploaded here and trigger the execution by configuring some scenarios. We can run or we can configure different types of scenarios like load testing, endurance testing, scalability testing, like that. So all different types of testing can be configured in controller or performance center. Okay, so we will discuss different types of performance testing today. And then we have one more component which is responsible for analyzing the results, so which we call as analysis. It's very good component which will assist us in which will assist us by giving us various metrics in terms of graphs. Okay, so all in all, these are the different components of load runner architecture. So we will discuss again about this architecture in our upcoming sessions in detail. So this thing we have discussed, and we have launched this component Vusion, and we have recorded a small flow, and we have replayed the script, and we have seen how the results are coming up. Okay, how to analyze this, how to understand the script that got generated, and how to replay the script, how to analyze the results at a very high level. We have discussed yesterday. Okay, so coming back to today's session. So in today's session, we are going to discuss about the types of performance testing. So before that, actually I do have slides for those, but I would like to explain or write some notes in the notepad today, and later on I can share that as well. So basically, performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So what do you mean by term speed, stability, and scalability? So here if you see, speed means how fast the application is responding to your request with expected or current load. Okay. In other words, response time should be less than SLA. So we will discuss these terms, but at a very high level, again, speed means how fast your application is responding, how fast a user is able to navigate from one page to another page. Okay, so that's about the speed, the term speed. And always the amount of time taken, okay, to navigate from one page to another page and loading a page and all those things should be less than the SLA. SLA means service level agreement. So generally it's a kind of an agreement between client and all the stakeholders that let's say the client will say that my application, okay, whenever users access my application, every page should load within 2 seconds. Okay, let's say user clicks a link and navigates from one page to another page, the page should load in 2 seconds. So that kind of SLA they can set, like they can set, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, like that, depending on the project architecture, depending on the client requirement, they can set the SLA. But uh, industry standard SLA is 2 seconds. Okay, if you ask me in general what is the industry standard, okay, so it is 2 seconds. So every page should load in 2 seconds. That is the industry standard. But there are some exceptions. When client is okay with that, there are some exceptions depending on the complex architecture, project architectures, and all those things. Okay, so this is about speed. What about stability? Stability means when the application is run for a longer duration, okay, the performance should not degrade, right? So let's say the application is continuously running for 4 or 5 hours. Let's say in the first 1 hour, the application was good, it was responding well, and as the time progresses, the application started responding slowly. That means there is some performance degradation which should not happen. So we have to deal with this stability also. And then scalability. So scalability means like the ability to handle, okay, increasing load without performance degradation. So let's say you're running some test with some 500 users. Now scalability means, let's say if you run with 1000 users, the performance should not degrade, right? That means the application must be scale, the application must be able to withstand, okay, more amount of load also. Okay, so these are the three terms, okay, with which the performance testing is measured: speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, now coming back to the topic, types of performance testing. Okay, there are different types of performance testing, so we will discuss those today. Load testing, then stress testing, then endurance testing, then scalability testing, then you can have a volume testing, then failover testing, then spike testing. Okay, then we will also discuss smoke testing also later, but primarily these are the different types of testing that generally we come across in different projects. Now first one is load testing. See, these three terms can be related to some of these performance testing types here. Okay, so load testing means checking the speed of the application, okay, checking the speed of the application, okay, by under some expected load. Okay, or you can mention this definition also, no problem. So you can write like this: load testing will ensure that the application under test is stable and can handle the expected load. Okay, so this point is also valid. The load test will ensure that the application under test, that means AUT means the application which we are testing, is stable and can handle expected load, okay, once the application is deployed. Okay, that means once the application is deployed and once you do the load test, our assumption is that for the load test is that the application is stable and can handle the expected load. What is load here? Load means, let's say, a number of users here. Let's say let's say 500 users. Let's consider yesterday's banking application only. Let's say 500 users. Now who is going to give this number to us? Who will say that you have to test this application with 500 users or 1000 users, like that? Who will give this input to us? So it will be the client or the business team will give this input to us. Okay, like you have to test with this much amount of load, or it can be it can be number of users, or it can be like a different input, but primarily let's say number of users for now, for basic understanding. So who is going to provide the input? Obviously any business requirement input will be given by client or business team only. Okay, now for how long this test will run? This test will run for 1 hour steady state. Okay, I'll explain you what is steady state later, but basically for time being just understand that this test will run for 1 hour. A load test will run for 1 hour. Okay, so let's say how many users are there? 500 users, right? So slowly one user after the other we will start, okay, and then run for 1 hour, and then run for 1 hour, and then after running for 1 hour slowly all those 500 users will, will come down. We have to bring them down. So the graph will look something like this. Okay, so this is 1 hour steady state. So so at this point, this 1 hour, the complete 500 users load is there here. Got it? So at this point, from here to here, so that is called steady state or steady time, where we have the full load, the 500 users load. Okay, so duration is 1 hour steady state, and this is the first major test that we run. So if this test is failed by mistake, okay, for some XYZ reason, if this test is a failure, then basically we don't run other types of tests. We will try to fix the issue for this test, and once this test is successful, we can move on to the other types of tests. Because if this test itself is a failure, then probably there is no point in going and testing the remaining types of tests like stress testing, endurance, scalability, and all those things. Okay, so once this test is successful, then we perform other tests like as per requirement. Okay, very important information, guys. So okay, now what do we verify? What do we validate? We validate the response times, obviously, as I told you, because the speed means, checking the speed means how fast the application is responding, how fast the page is loading. Okay, how fast the page is loading, how fast the application is responding, how fast a user is able to navigate from one page to another page. All these things matter, right? So response times is what we validate first. We validate for any application slowness. We validate for some server metrics, server side metrics. I'll tell you what is server side metrics, because we didn't discuss what is server yet. That is tomorrow's session. Okay, so like memory, CPU, etc. Okay, so these are the primary things that we validate as part of load test. So are you guys getting what is this load test all about? So load testing is the first major type of test that we do in every project. It doesn't matter if it is any project anywhere across the world. Load test is first thing that we do, first major type of test that we do. Okay, so it will be run for 1 hour steady state. Okay, with the number of users that client will provides us. Okay, so any questions? I'll take a pause here. I'll ask any questions as part of this load testing. Are you guys understanding? So we will implement these things practically later, but I just want you to understand the different types of performance testing we have. Okay, so this is about load testing. The second type of test, let's say load test is successful. Let's say the load test is successful. Now the next type of test is stress testing. What is this stress testing? Stress testing means, as the name suggests, stressing the application beyond the beyond the expected load. For example, in simple terms, checking the performance of the application with more amount of load than the load test, than the load test volumes. Okay, load test volume means this number. So here, let's say we tested with 500. Probably in stress testing, we can go ahead and test with 600, 700, 800 like that. And in some cases, you can test to an extent where you find the breaking point. Okay, that means you go on testing where, and you see where the application is breaking. Okay, so for example, if load test is done with 500 users, then stress testing can be done with let's say 700, okay, 800, or let's say 1000 users, etc. Okay, as I said, there will be some situation where you have to go on, test, keep on testing until the application breaks. Okay, you can test a scenario, okay, until application, okay, breaks, or you find the breaking point, whatever it is. Okay, so like you keep on increasing the users until you find the breaking point. That is also a valid thing. For example, I'll give you a generic example. Let's say there is a restaurant. There are 5 tables in a restaurant. There are 5 tables. Now there is one helper also. The job of the helper is to take the orders from the customers on those 5 tables and then serve the food or deliver the food on the table. Let's say due to increase in demand, the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 5 to 7. So this helper should now handle 7 tables. Okay, that means take all the orders from 7 tables and deliver the food to them. Probably it can take 20 minutes or 15 minutes, something like that. Now again there is a huge demand. The owner decided to increase the number of tables from 7 to 9, and then this helper is still able to handle the load. That means is still able to take the orders from all 9 tables, but the delivery time increased. Now previously the helper used to deliver the food in let's say 15-20 minutes. Now with 9 tables in place, the helper is able to deliver the food in let's say 40-45 minutes, because the number of tables increased and there is only one helper. Now again there is a little bit more demand, let's say on the weekends. The owner decided to increase the number of tables from 9 to 11. Then the helper decided to stop working and said, no, I cannot help or assist anything beyond this 9. Okay, then let's say he stopped working and he left. So what is the max that the helper could assist is only 9 tables. That's the breaking point, and that too with poor performance. Like when I say poor performance, that means he's taking like 40-45 minutes to deliver the food. Like earlier he used to take 20 minutes. That means performance degraded. So the max he could handle is only 9 tables. With that too with poor performance, the performance degradation. Similarly here also, when you keep on increasing the load, at some point the application can break. Okay, before it breaks, probably you might get some high response times. Okay, before it breaks, probably you can get some high response times, very high response times you can get. Okay, so that's one thing as part of stress testing. So how much time you have to run? So again, you can run with, let's say, 1 hour steady. In 1 hour steady state also you can validate. Okay, same thing we validate here also. So let's say you started a test, like let's say you started with some 50 users. One, let's say you started with some 50 users, and then you ran, let's say, for 15 minutes, and then you wanted to increase the load. Yes, you can increase. Let's say you added 100 more users. Then you want to run for another, let's say, some another 15 minutes. Then let's say you want to add another 200 users. Then let's say you want to run for another 30 minutes. Like that, you can keep on increasing the load and you can find out, okay, how the application is behaving when you are stressing the system. Okay, so that is about stress testing, guys. Any questions here? Are you guys understanding what is the difference between this load testing and stress testing? Okay, so anything beyond this volume, for according to today's example, can be a stress, right? We are stressing the application, okay, beyond its capacity. Now the next important one. Any questions? I'll take a pause for 30 seconds. Any questions? Are you guys understanding the difference between different types of tests here?
Yes.
Okay. So here, next one is um, endurance testing. Basically, this is also called as soak testing in some projects. In some projects, they call it as duration test also. Okay. So let me write like this. In some projects, they call endurance. In some projects, they call soak. In some projects, they call duration. Meaning is same for all the types of testing, guys. Okay. Now, what is this test? What is this all about? So this type of testing is directly related to the term stability that we have used here. Okay, so this type of testing is all about checking the stability of the application. Okay, checking the stability of the application by running the test for longer duration. Okay, so when I say longer duration, the duration times can be depending on the project. Okay, again it can be depending on the project. It can be 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and it can be 5 days also, depending on the project. But 5 days is very, very rare. So most frequently is what we run is like 8 hours. Okay, most frequently, I mean, which is most common across all the projects, in various companies, they prefer to run like 8 hours. Okay, so what is that we are trying to verify here? When you are running a test for longer duration, how the application is responding. So let's say you're running a test for 3 hours. Okay, let's say you're running a test for 3 hours. Now, let's say 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Okay, you're running a test for 3 hours of duration test or endurance test. 9 a.m. you started, you want to end at 12 a.m. 12 p.m. So 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Okay, how the application is performing. Okay, how application is performing. Like what are the response times? Okay, what are the response times? We have to verify. Same thing you can verify in next 1 hour. Okay, probably you can verify next 1 hour. So here let's say 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and here probably 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. right? So when you're running this endurance test for longer duration, what we are trying to find out is how the application is performing. Okay, in different time intervals. Okay, so let's say 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. it was absolutely working fine. Let's say on an average you are getting like 1.5 to 2 seconds response time on an average you are getting. Okay, on an average you are getting 1.5 to 2 seconds you are getting on an average. So let's say in the second one, in the second 1 hour, it should be same. Okay, because we didn't change anything, right? The test is still running, it should not change, the performance should not degrade. So it should be the same, like 1.5 to 2 seconds, 1.5 to 2 seconds. So consistently it has to perform like this, the response time. Let's say in the last 1 hour we identified that, let's say it is like 4 seconds to 6 seconds it is coming on an average. That means the performance degraded here. The performance degraded here. That means there is no stability. In the first 1 hour it was working fine. Okay, in the first 1 hour it was working fine. Okay, and then in the second 1 hour it was working fine. In the third 1 hour, okay, the performance completely degraded. The performance completely degraded. Okay, so this could happen when you're running a test for longer duration. There's a possibility that this could happen. So we have to find out whether how the application is performing in the longer duration like this. Okay, we validate all these things again. Okay, we validate all these things: response times, application slowness, server side metrics, and when you run this type of test, there's a chance of something called memory leaks. Okay, which we'll discuss in detail in our upcoming sessions. What is memory leak and all, but there is some concept called memory leaks. Okay, which can happen mostly in this type of test. I'm not saying it cannot occur in other type of test. It can, but there are high chances that memory leaks can happen in this type of test only because you're running for longer duration. Okay, so very important points, guys, for interview point of view also, very important. Okay, so did you guys understand about endurance testing? Now, what is the amount of load that I have to apply here? So it depends. In some projects, okay, in some projects they go with 100% load. That means whatever you tested in load test. Okay, whatever you tested in load test. Okay, in some projects, in some other projects, okay, they will go with only 75% of the load. Okay, 75% of the load. That means whatever you tested in load testing, right? Whatever the volumes, whatever you used, okay, in load test. So in load test, let's say you ran with 500 users. So 75% of 500 is 375. Okay, like that. So now if you ask me, sir, which one I should follow here, either this or this, first observe what your project team is following. If they're following this, you continue to follow this. If they're following this, you continue to follow this. But if you have to take a decision on your own, then I suggest you to go with this, because I don't see any major change. I mean, I'm okay if I want to apply the same load and I want to run for longer duration. There is nothing wrong in it, right? So better to go with this one. If you don't have anything specific to be followed, better to go with the same amount of load, whatever you tested in load, okay, in the actual load test. Okay, so hope these points are clear as part of endurance testing. Any questions? So all these things I'll show you practically also, like how to configure these type of scenarios in controller or performance center, or how to run a complete load test. Okay, end-to-end load testing we will see. Okay, then fourth one is scalability test. Okay, so I mean, you see again, it, as the name suggests here, the performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. The term scalability can be directly related to this type of test. Okay, so basically, in short, checking the application, or you can write like this: testing the application for future growth. In short, okay, or checking how scalable is your application. Okay, so what do you mean by this specifically? So I will tell you some example. Let's say today you ran a load test. Okay, uh, today you ran a load test with 500 users and it was successful. Nothing went wrong. Everything was fine. It was successful test. Now you can ask me, sir, how do you define if it is a successful test or if it's a failed test? There's a different criteria. We'll discuss that in our upcoming session. So let's assume that it was successful for today. Now, when it comes to scalability test, so what client might say that, hey, we assume, now client is assuming that in next 6 months or 1 year, okay, volume or load can increase by 50%. So because client is assuming that the load or the user volumes can increase by 50% in next 6 months. So considering that, now itself, okay, considering considering the above point, now itself we will have to test with 150% load. Okay, that is 500. What is 50% of 500? 250. That is 750 users we have to test. I'll tell you one example. In 2020, I'm just telling an example. In 2020, a real-time example only. In 2020, I was working for some bank. Okay, I was working for some US bank. Um, I mean, that was a pandemic year. In the month of June, in the month of June, we had a meeting, and the client said there is a huge increase in the number of users accessing our online applications. Okay, because of pandemic, people are not going to banks, nearby banks directly. Okay, they are concentrating on the online applications. Okay, they are trying to use online applications. So considering the pandemic, okay, to continue for a few more months or something like that at that point of time, so we assume that the number of users, okay, accessing our online applications will reach up to 400%. That's what the communication was. Will reach up to 400%. Now the client asked us to check whether our applications are scalable enough to handle 400% load or not. Okay, so at that point of time, what we did, can anyone tell? Any guess what should be done? Because the client said, can you check if the applications are scalable enough to handle the load of, or the applications are, can you check if the applications are able to withstand 400% load? That's what the question was. So can you check how, can you tell me how to understand this and how to test this? Any guess? Anyone? So normally we generally run 100% load test. Okay, normally we run 100% load test. But at that point of time, because of pandemic, client asked us to check if the applications are able to withstand some 400% load. Any guess? Anyone? Uh, how what we might have done? How do you calculate the number of users for that? So let's say 100% load test users volume is 500. Okay, then what should we do? Should we test for 400% load? That is 500 into 2000 users. Is it correct? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, 2000 users. Okay, 2000 users. But should we directly test 2000? Should we directly test 2000? Probably no. We should not test 2000 users directly. Okay, because client said users might increase up to 400%. That doesn't mean that we have to test for 2000 users directly. Why? Because let's say this test failed. My applications were not able to withstand 2000 users. The test failed. Now the client will ask me immediately whether the applications are able to handle 200% or 300% at least. Then what will be your answer? Then we cannot say anything at that point of time, because we only don't know whether application will handle 200% or 300%, because we didn't test. We directly tested 400. That's the reason when you have a bigger number to test, always increase the load gradually. So first test for 200% load users volume, okay, that is 1000 users, and then 300% load, okay, users volume, that is 1500 users. Okay, then luckily for most of the applications that we tested, this was passed, and for few applications it failed at 300% load. That means the applications were not able to handle 300% load itself. Then what was the immediate solution? Because it was pandemic, we have to provide the solution immediately. The immediate solution is to increase the application infrastructure. Okay, immediate solution was to increase the application infrastructure, like for example, like a RAM from 16 GB, let's say, to 32 GB, just an example. Okay, or change CPU, processors, whatever it is. Okay, so when you increase the application infrastructure, then obviously the applications will be able to withstand more amount of load like this. Okay, because most of the times the application infrastructure might be the main culprit also. I mean, the code that they have written might also be the culprit, but because that was a pandemic time, they didn't have much time to review the code and tune the code and all those things. Simply they have to upgrade it like this. Okay, tomorrow I will tell you what is, when you upgrade or when you add few more servers, when you add few more servers, or when you upgrade the existing server configuration, what is that called? Okay, there is something called scale out, scale up. Okay, we will discuss that. Okay, any doubts? And next type of testing is volume testing. Okay, hope you guys don't have any doubts as of now. If you have, you can ask me at the end of the session also, but if you have anything, you can ask me right now. The next one is volume testing. Okay, so volume testing is pretty much similar as load test, same as load test. Nothing changed, no change in it. We don't see any change. Okay, except that huge data will be, okay, inserted into database. Okay, and then run a load test kind of thing. Okay, so basically what you call as volume test is same as load test, except that huge data will be inserted into database. Okay, so what do you mean by this? For example, today I'm running my application with 500 users. Okay, and I will continue to run this for next 6 months, let's say. Okay, and that means in real time 500 users are accessing my application. Let's say for 6 months they access the application. In these 6 months, okay, there was so much amount of data, okay, got inserted into database. Okay, so that means the number of record, okay, it means number of records increased. Okay, number of records increased in database. Now considering that or keeping this sort of database records increase, okay, considering this sort of increase, data increase, okay, what we have to do as part of volume testing is we have to intentionally insert some lakhs of data into database and then run the load test. Okay, so what is happening? So we are intentionally inserting huge amount of data into database and then running the load test. So who will insert? Okay, so we have to take the help of DBA, database administrator team, okay, to insert junk data or bulk data into database records. Okay, now I'll tell you one example why we have to do this type of volume testing is, see, in future we don't know how many records will be there in the database, and when there are more records in database, how our application is responding also is important. Okay, so when there is more data, see, for example, simple, take your laptop example. If in your laptop, let's say there is a D drive. In D drive there are so many folders, like let's say initially there were 100 folders, now there are some 400 folders, and each folder has some lakhs of records. Now imagine how much time it will take to open each folder or copy folders and all. Data will increase, right? So when data is increased, the computer will respond slowly, the system will respond slowly, yes or no? Similarly, when huge amount of data is in database, okay, the application might also perform slowly. So for that reason, before itself, we try to insert huge amount of data into database with the help of database administrator team, and then run the load test and see how the application is performing. Okay, so here we focus mostly on how SQL queries. Okay, hope you heard about this, especially the guys coming from non-IT. Hope you heard about these SQL queries. Here we mostly focus on SQL queries or procedures performance. Okay, here we focus mostly on how SQL queries or procedures perform. Okay, so you might have heard about some queries like for example, query will be something like this: select star from employee or something like that. You might have seen this sort of queries. This is a simple query, but the queries will be like this. Okay, just for your information who are coming from non-IT. So let's take a college example. Let's say I started a college. Okay, I have my own website. Okay, I want to store all the college information, so I started storing all the college information. Okay, so students information, the amount, the different courses, fees paid, different staff available, administration department information, every information I want to store in my database, website, application. Okay, the college admit website. Now let's say after 10 years, obviously all the number of students will increase every year. Let's say some 2000 3000 students started coming. Now the database will increase with the number of records, yes or no? So when database records increase, how the application is responding is what we test as part of volume test. So this type of test we run very rarely. Okay, generally, I mean, at least in my past experience, very rarely we ran these sort of tests. Okay, but there is this one type of test, that's it. Then any questions? Any questions as of now? Yes, Iswar, auto scaling. Yeah, in the previous example, yes, it was auto scaling. Auto scaling we can implement. Okay, now because most of the applications are on cloud, auto scaling is an inbuilt feature of it. Yeah, it can auto scale on its own when the user load is more. Yes, perfect. So then this failover testing we'll discuss tomorrow, because to understand this failover testing, we have to understand the terms called server, web server, application server, database server. So these sort of terms we have to understand if we want to understand this failover testing. We will touch base this tomorrow. Okay. Then what about spike testing? It is straightforward. Okay, testing the application with sudden increase or decrease of user volumes. Okay, sudden increase and then sudden decrease. So then it's a kind of ECG, electrocardiogram, something like that. You might have seen, right? ECG, it will go like this, something like this. So let's say suddenly I increase 100 users. Okay, rapidly I increase 100 users, and then I ran for 1 or 2 minutes, and suddenly I decrease, I remove all the users, and suddenly I'll again increase 200 users, like this. My wish. So I want to see how my application is responding when I am suddenly increasing the load, extreme load, or suddenly I'm applying some extreme load and removing that extreme load. Okay, so that is about spike testing. We'll see that later. Okay, not required, no, but hope you understood the definition of it. Any questions? Okay. So tomorrow we are going to see about failover testing, guys. Very, very important in nowadays for interviews. They will definitely ask you about what is failover testing. Okay. So we'll see that tomorrow because we have a dependency, right? Dependency topics that we have to understand what is server first. Then only I can explain you failover testing. Then actually there is something called smoke testing also. Okay. Basically, um, this type of test we run with minimal users for minimum amount of time. Let's say 10 or users, 10 or 20 users, okay, for let's say 5 10 minutes or 15 minutes, like that. That's it, not more than that, enough. Okay, so you can run with 3 users, 5 users also, that's fine. So why we run this smoke testing? See, we run this smoke testing to ensure that our scripts are fine and then application is also up and running. So when you run a smoke test, you'll get a clarity that whatever the scripts you developed, those are running fine. At the same time, the application is up and running. If the smoke test is successful, then only you can run any of these type of tests. So let's say today evening 9 o'clock, okay, or let's say tomorrow afternoon 3 o'clock, you are planning to run a load test. Now before you run a load test, at least let's say 2 3 hours before, you run a smoke test. So when you run a smoke test, okay, so what is that you are trying to understand is, so before I run my load test with huge volume, okay, if I run a smoke test, I will get a clarity that if my scripts are working fine or if the application is up and running. So if smoke test is successful, then I can go ahead and run the load test. Similarly, if you want to run endurance test, let's say today evening 8 o'clock. So let's say 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock sometime, you run a smoke test and see whether the application is running fine or not. If smoke test is successful, then only we will run the performance test. Okay. So once the smoke test is successful, we will send an email to all the development teams and environment teams that okay, our smoke test is successful. We are planning to run a load test in next couple of hours. So or we are planning to run a load test from let's say 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Okay. Please do not do any deployments or anything like that during that mentioned period, because when you are running a performance test, nothing should happen in that environment. Okay, no one else should test in that environment, and nothing should happen like deployments or any, no one should interfere in that because it can give some abnormal results. Okay, so I'm going here and saving this file. Okay, I'm gonna share this document also to you guys later. Okay, and I'm gonna share these PPTs also. I do have these PPTs. Okay, and tomorrow I'll explain you this diagram because we will discuss with this web server, app server, load balancer, database server. So I'll tell you about what are these and what is this diagram all about and what is failover testing. Okay, and and few more things, because server is a term that we use day in day out in our office projects. So that is the first thing that you have to understand. So tomorrow our focus will be on those servers only. Okay, any questions? So hope you guys understood, okay, the concepts. And if you have any further questions, please do reach out to me on WhatsApp. Okay, if it's very important, you can call me directly. Okay, I'm there in that WhatsApp group. So thank you once again, and hope to see all of you in the upcoming sessions as well.